The night before humanity changed forever, Captain Daniela Reeves sat alone in the observation dome of Earth's primary orbital station, watching the stars blur past like scattered diamonds on black velvet. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, running simulations, checking equipment, reviewing protocols that felt inadequate for what was coming. Tomorrow, she would lead humanity's first delegation into the unknown. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Daniela was not the person anyone expected for this mission. At 43, she had spent most of her career hauling cargo between Mars and the asteroid belt, navigating through debris fields and solar storms with the kind of calm precision that made her crew feel safe even when the hull was groaning under pressure. She had never sought glory or recognition. She simply knew how to keep people alive in the cold emptiness of space, and that skill had caught the attention of the United Earth Assembly when they needed someone who could think clearly under impossible pressure. The signal had arrived 3 months ago, cutting through every communication channel on Earth simultaneously. It was brief and direct. A species called the Sildari Collective had detected humanity's presence and invited Earth to join the Interstellar Commerce League. The meeting would take place at a neutral way station called Helios Junction. Earth was advised to send representatives who could negotiate trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and mutual defense protocols. The message ended with a single line that made Daniela's skin prickle with unease. "We hope you will choose cooperation over conflict. History shows that not all species make wise decisions." Back on Earth, celebrations had erupted in the streets. Humanity was not alone. The dream of joining a galactic community was real. World leaders gave speeches about unity and progress. Scientists wept with joy at the thought of sharing knowledge with advanced civilizations. The stock market soared as corporations imagined new resources and markets among the stars. But Daniela had read that final line over and over, hearing the warning beneath the welcome. History shows that not all species make wise decisions. It sounded less like advice and more like a threat. The Assembly had chosen her to command the diplomatic vessel Unity's Dawn, a mid-sized frigate retrofitted with state-of-the-art communication systems and enough defensive capabilities to survive a hostile encounter without appearing aggressive. Her crew consisted of 27 specialists, linguists, anthropologists, engineers, medical staff, and security personnel. Among them was Ambassador Henrik Laurent, a silver-haired diplomat from New Geneva who had spent 40 years negotiating treaties between Earth's fractious nations. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who believed that reason could solve any conflict. Sitting beside Henrik during their final briefing had been Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, head of security for the mission. Yuki was 31 and had the sharp eyes of someone who trusted nothing without verification. She had grown up in the Tokyo underground shelters during the resource wars and carried the memory of chaos in every careful movement. While Henrik spoke about finding common ground and building relationships, Yuki had asked the harder questions. What if they see us as weak? What if cooperation is just their word for submission? What if we walk into that station and never walk out? Daniela had no answers then, and she had none now. But she understood Yuki's fear because she felt it too. Humans had barely managed to stop destroying themselves. The scars of war still covered the planet. Entire cities remained as monuments to hatred and greed. If humanity struggled to find peace among its own kind, what hope did they have of navigating the complex politics of a galaxy filled with unknown species? A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. The door to the observation dome slid open, and Dr. Octavia Grant stepped inside. Octavia was the mission's chief xenobiologist, a woman of 62 with bronze skin and eyes that sparkled with perpetual curiosity. She had spent her entire career studying extremophile organisms in Earth's harshest environments, convinced that life would find a way to exist anywhere conditions allowed. Now she was about to meet life that had evolved under completely alien suns. "You should be resting," Octavia said gently, settling into the seat beside Daniela. "Tomorrow is going to be exhausting." "I know," Daniela replied without looking away from the stars. "I just keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong." Octavia nodded slowly. Henrik believes we can charm them with our humanity. Yuki believes we should assume they want to harm us. You're caught in the middle, trying to prepare for both possibilities. And what do you believe? The scientist was quiet for a long moment. I believe that any species capable of crossing the stars has solved problems we can barely imagine. They've mastered physics, energy production, resource management, and social cooperation on a scale that makes our achievements look primitive. That kind of progress requires intelligence, patience, and the ability to think beyond immediate survival. She paused, her expression growing serious. But I also believe that intelligence doesn't guarantee kindness. Evolution rewards survival, not morality. Whatever we meet out there will have its own history, its own scars, its own reasons for inviting us to this meeting. We need to be ready for anything. Daniela finally turned to look at her. That's not very reassuring. It's not meant to be, Octavia said with a sad smile. But it's honest. And honesty is the only thing we can afford right now. They sat together in silence as Earth rotated slowly beneath them, a blue marble suspended in the void. Somewhere down there, billions of people were sleeping peacefully, dreaming of a bright future among the stars. They trusted their leaders to make the right choices. They trusted Daniela to bring their representatives home safely. The weight of that trust felt heavier than the ship she would command. Far below, in a military complex buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Thomas Whitmore stood in a command center that had been designed to survive nuclear war. Banks of monitors displayed real-time data from every defense satellite, every weapons platform, every ship in Earth's modest fleet. He was a man of 68 who had spent his entire life preparing for worst-case scenarios. While politicians spoke about hope and cooperation, Whitmore's job was to imagine every possible disaster and have a response ready. On the central screen, a technical schematic rotated slowly. It showed a warship unlike anything humanity had ever built. The Valkyrie was 3 times the size of Unity's Dawn, bristling with experimental weapon systems and powered by a prototype reactor that could theoretically generate enough energy to glass an entire planet. It had been constructed in secret over the past 5 years, hidden in the shadow of Saturn's rings, known only to a handful of military leaders and the Assembly's Security Council. The ship was not meant to fly. It was meant to be insurance, a final option if everything else failed. But Whitmore had ordered it fully staffed and ready to launch within 6 hours of receiving coded authorization. The crew of 400 had been training for months, preparing for a mission they hoped would never come. They knew that if they were called into action, it would mean that first contact had gone catastrophically wrong. "Do you really think we'll need it?" asked Colonel Rebecca Foster, Whitmore's second-in-command. She was standing beside him, her reflection visible in the dark glass of the monitors. "I hope not," Whitmore replied quietly. "But hope isn't a strategy. The Sildari invited us to this meeting, but they didn't explain why. They didn't share their technology or their culture. They didn't offer friendship or partnership. They offered membership in a league that we know nothing about. That's not how peaceful civilizations behave. That's how empires recruit vassals." Rebecca frowned. "You think it's a trap?" "I think we're being tested," Whitmore corrected. "And I think the test started the moment they sent that message. They're watching how we respond. They're measuring our technology, our unity, our willingness to submit. If we arrive at Helios Junction acting like grateful children thankful for their attention, they'll treat us accordingly. But if we show strength, if we make it clear that Earth will not be conquered or controlled, then maybe they'll respect us enough to negotiate as equals. And if they don't?" Whitmore's jaw tightened. "Then we show them that humanity didn't claw its way to the top of Earth's food chain by being passive. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own stupidity. We're still here because we fight when we have to. If the Sildari want a war, they'll discover that humans are very good at war." The journey to Helios Junction took 11 days through a corridor of space that felt increasingly wrong with each passing hour. Daniela stood on the bridge of Unity's dawn, watching the navigation displays with growing unease. The route provided by the Sildari had taken them through regions of space that Earth's telescopes had never properly mapped, past star systems that showed signs of ancient industry, massive structures orbiting dead planets, rings of debris that might once have been cities or fleets. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka from the sensor station. Her voice carried an edge that made everyone on the bridge stop what they were doing. Daniela crossed to her position, studying the data flowing across the screens. "What am I looking at?" "Radiation signatures," Yuki replied, her fingers dancing across the controls to refine the image. "Consistent with high-energy weapons discharge. Multiple sites across that moon in the third orbital position. The decay patterns suggest these detonations happened within the last 50 years. Ambassador Henrik Laurent appeared at Daniela's shoulder, his diplomatic composure cracking slightly. "A war? Out here?" "More than that," said Dr. Octavia Grant, who had joined them from the science lab. She pointed to another set of readings. "Look at the planetary surface. The atmospheric composition shows elevated levels of carbon and silicon particulates. The kind you'd see after sustained bombardment. That moon didn't just see a battle. It saw extinction." The bridge fell silent. Through the viewport, the moon hung like a gray tombstone against the black of space, its surface scarred with craters that glowed faintly with residual heat. Somewhere down there, perhaps a civilization had lived and laughed and dreamed of the stars, only to be erased by weapons that humanity was just beginning to understand. "The Sildari never mentioned this," Henrik said quietly. "In all their communications, they spoke of commerce and cooperation. They made the Interstellar Commerce League sound like a peaceful organization." "Maybe it is peaceful now," Daniela replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe this is why they formed the League, to prevent conflicts like whatever happened here." Yuki shook her head, her expression hard. "Or maybe the League is what happened here. Maybe this moon belonged to someone who refused to join, and they were made an example. A warning to others about the price of independence." "That's speculation," Henrik protested, but even he sounded uncertain. "So is assuming they're benevolent," Yuki countered. "Captain, we should turn back. Send a probe to complete the mission while we return to Earth and report what we've found. We're flying blind into a situation we don't understand, and that dead moon is telling us that mistakes in this region of space have permanent consequences." Daniela wanted to agree. Every instinct honed by years of dangerous flight through hostile environments told her that continuing was reckless. But she also knew what turning back would mean. Earth had announced this mission to the entire world. Billions of people were watching and waiting. If Unity's dawn retreated at the first sign of trouble, humanity would appear cowardly and weak to civilizations that might judge worth by courage. "We keep going," she said finally. "But we go in ready. Yuki, I want defensive systems fully charged at all times. Octavia, analyze everything we pass and look for patterns. If this League has enemies, I want to know what they're capable of. Henrik, prepare multiple negotiation strategies. If we walk into that station and the Sildari demand submission, we need responses that protect Earth's sovereignty without triggering a conflict." The next 3 days passed in tense silence as Unity's dawn pushed deeper into unknown territory. They encountered more signs of abandoned settlements, derelict stations that had once hummed with activity, now cold and dark. Twice they detected faint distress signals from ancient beacons, desperate automated pleas for help that had been repeating for decades with no one left alive to answer them. The crew's mood shifted from excitement to apprehension. Engineers worked double shifts maintaining the ship's systems. Security personnel ran combat drills that everyone hoped would never be necessary. Scientists compiled data that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of this region of space. Whatever the Interstellar Commerce League represented, it had risen from the ashes of something terrible. On the 9th day, they received a new transmission from the Sildari. It arrived without warning, bypassing their communication protocols to display directly on every screen aboard the ship. The image showed a creature that made several crew members gasp in surprise. The Sildari representative stood roughly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms arranged symmetrically along a torso covered in overlapping plates that resembled both armor and skin. Its head was triangular with 3 eyes arranged in a pattern that suggested it could see in multiple directions simultaneously. When it spoke, the voice that emerged was processed through translation software that gave it an unsettling mechanical quality. Vessel Unity's dawn of the species humanity, you are approaching Helios Junction. We trust your journey has been enlightening. You have passed through the remnant zones, regions that once housed civilizations who chose defiance over cooperation. Their fate serves as instruction for newcomers to our community. The Interstellar Commerce League offers prosperity and protection to those who contribute. Those who refuse contribution discover that the universe has no patience for waste. You will arrive at Helios Junction in 47 of your hours. Prepare your credentials and your commitment. The conclave of voices awaits your petition for membership. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in shocked silence. Petition for membership? Henrik's face had gone pale. They said invitation. They said Earth was welcome. Now they're talking about petitions and credentials like we're beggars asking for admission to their club. Yuki was already at her station, pulling up weapon systems diagnostics. Captain, this is a setup. They brought us out here to intimidate us with those dead worlds, to make us afraid, and now they're changing the terms. This isn't first contact. This is a shakedown. Daniela's mind raced through possibilities. They were 11 days from Earth, surrounded by evidence of the League's capacity for violence, approaching a station that was undoubtedly filled with species who had already submitted to whatever terms the Sildari demanded. Unity's dawn was alone, outgunned, and completely vulnerable. Henrik, what are our options? She asked. The ambassador straightened his jacket, visibly trying to compose himself. We negotiate. We listen to their terms and we counteroffer. We make it clear that Earth is willing to engage in fair trade and mutual cooperation, but we will not accept subjugation. If they want resources or technology from us, they have to offer equivalent value in return. That's basic diplomacy. And if they refuse? Octavia asked. If they say the terms are non-negotiable? Henrik hesitated. Then we stall. We request time to consult with Earth leadership. We use every procedural delay we can think of while we figure out what they really want and how we can give them enough to satisfy them without surrendering our independence. Daniela turned to Yuki. If diplomacy fails, can we fight our way out? The security chief's expression was grim. Not against an entire station. If they decide to destroy us, we might take a few of their ships with us, but we won't survive. Our best option would be to run, jump to faster-than-light speed before they can coordinate their response. But that would mean abandoning any hope of peaceful relations. Earth would be alone in a hostile galaxy. The weight of command pressed down on Daniela like physical force. Every choice led to darkness. Negotiate from weakness and Earth might become a vassal state, stripped of autonomy and resources. Fight or flee and Earth would have enemies among the stars with no allies and no understanding of the dangers that awaited. There had to be another option, something they weren't seeing. Open a secure channel to Earth, Daniela ordered. Full encryption. I need to speak with General Whitmore immediately. The communication officer's hands moved across her console, establishing a tight beam connection through the relay satellites they had deployed along their route. After several tense minutes, Whitmore's weathered face appeared on the screen. Captain Reeves, your timing is interesting. We've been monitoring unusual activity in Earth's outer system. Long-range sensors detected 3 unidentified vessels entering the heliopause approximately 2 hours ago. They're holding position near Neptune, not approaching, just watching. Care to explain why we suddenly have visitors? Daniela's blood ran cold. They're making sure Earth can't send reinforcements. General, we're walking into a trap. The Sildari aren't interested in cooperation. They're interested in conquest, and they've spent this entire trip showing us what happens to species who resist. Whitmore's jaw clenched. Then come home, Captain. Turn that ship around and get back to Earth. We'll deal with whatever comes next. If we retreat, those ships near Neptune might interpret it as hostile action, Henrik interjected. We could be starting the very war we're trying to prevent. And if we continue to Helios Junction and they force us to accept terms that betray Earth's sovereignty? Yuki added. We'd be signing away humanity's future under duress. Whitmore was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as he calculated scenarios. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of terrible certainty. Captain Reeves, I'm about to share classified information. 3 months ago, when the Sildari first made contact, Earth's leadership made a decision. We could not afford to appear weak. We could not afford to be caught unprepared. So we built something. A message of our own, one written in a language every civilization understands. On Daniela's screen, new data began to appear. Schematics of a vessel that made her breath catch in her throat. The Valkyrie was enormous, covered in weapons systems that seemed designed for one purpose: overwhelming destruction. That ship is currently stationed in high orbit around Earth, fully crewed and ready to deploy, Whitmore continued. If you give the signal, if you transmit the activation code, the Valkyrie will jump to your position within 6 hours. It will arrive with weapons hot and make very clear that humanity is not prey. But Captain, you need to understand what you'd be unleashing. That ship was built for war. Once it arrives, there's no taking back the message it sends. You would be choosing conflict over cooperation, gambling that fear will earn us respect. Daniela stared at the schematic, understanding the impossible choice being placed before her. Go to Helios Junction as supplicants and hope diplomacy could salvage humanity's dignity, or call forth a weapon that might protect Earth but would paint humanity as aggressive and dangerous in the eyes of every galactic civilization. Helios Junction materialized before them like a city carved from starlight and shadow. The station was massive beyond comprehension, a structure that dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. Dozens of ships from species Daniela couldn't identify moved in precise patterns around docking ports that glowed with soft amber light. Through the viewport, she could see the central hub, a sphere of crystalline material that refracted the light of nearby stars into cascades of color that seemed almost alive. Unity's dawn approached slowly, following the guidance beacons that pulled them toward an assigned docking bay. The crew worked in tense silence, each person aware that they were crossing a threshold from which there might be no return. Daniela had made her decision during the final hours of their approach, and the weight of it sat in her chest like a stone. The activation code for the Valkyrie remained untransmitted. For now. Docking clamps engaged, reported the pilot, a steady-voiced woman named Patricia Okonkwo who had flown relief missions through war zones and never lost her calm. Station gravity at 0.8 Earth normal. Atmosphere composition compatible with human biology. They're ready for us. Henrik Loron stood near the airlock, straightening his formal diplomatic robes for the 10th time. His hands trembled slightly despite his composed expression. Beside him, Yuki Tanaka checked her sidearm one final time, though they all knew that if violence erupted, personal weapons would be meaningless. Octavia Grant clutched a data pad containing every piece of information humanity had gathered about xenobiology and first contact protocols, knowing full well that none of it might matter. Daniela joined them at the airlock, dressed in her captain's uniform with Earth's emblem displayed prominently over her heart. She had decided against wearing a weapon. If they were going to negotiate, she wanted to appear as someone seeking understanding, not conflict. But in her jacket pocket, sealed in a small encrypted device, rested the codes that could summon the Valkyrie. Her finger could touch it at any moment. "Remember what we discussed," she said quietly to her team. Henrik leads the conversation. Yuki observes and assesses threats. Octavia studies everything and looks for cultural cues we might miss. I'm there to make decisions if circumstances change rapidly. We stay together, we stay calm, and we remember that billions of people are depending on us to come home with something better than war. The airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Beyond it stretched a corridor of polished metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The walls were covered in symbols from languages Daniela didn't recognize, scripts that flowed and twisted in patterns that hurt her eyes if she looked at them too long. At the far end of the corridor, 3 figures waited. The Sildari representative from the transmission stood in the center, its 4 arms held in a posture that their cultural database suggested might indicate formal greeting. To its left stood a creature that resembled a collection of floating crystalline shards held together by some invisible force, constantly shifting and rearranging itself. To its right was something that looked almost human, close enough to be unsettling, with pale blue skin and eyes that were entirely black without visible pupils. Ambassador Henrik Loran of the species Humanity, the Sildari said, its translated voice echoing in the corridor. I am Counselor Thresh of the Sildari Collective. With me are Representative Kalos of the Shardmind Unity and Envoy Rilith of the Peloran Assembly. We welcome you to Helios Junction on behalf of the Interstellar Commerce League. Your petition for membership will be reviewed by the Conclave of Voices. Henrik stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over. Counselor Thresh, we appreciate the welcome. However, I must clarify that Earth was invited to this meeting. We were not aware that membership required a petition process. We came here believing this would be a dialogue between equals, not an application for admission. The 3 aliens exchanged glances, a gesture that was somehow universal despite their vastly different biologies. The floating crystalline entity, Kalos, spoke next, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. All species begin as petitioners. This is how the League maintains order and ensures that new members understand their obligations before they are granted privileges. You will present your case before the Conclave. They will determine whether humanity has sufficient value to justify inclusion. And if they determine we don't? Yuki asked, her hand resting casually near her weapon. Rilith, the pale humanoid, smiled without warmth. Then you return to your isolated system with our thanks for making the journey. Though I should mention that species denied membership typically find the galaxy to be a dangerous place. Trade routes close to them. Defense pacts exclude them. Pirates and raiders discover their locations. It becomes very difficult to survive alone. There it was. The threat wrapped in politeness. Join the League on their terms or face isolation and predation. Daniela felt anger rising in her chest, hot and sharp. They had traveled across the stars hoping to find enlightened civilizations, partners in exploring the universe's mysteries. Instead they had found extortionists with advanced weapons and no shame about using fear as a negotiating tool. Take us to the Conclave, Daniela said, stepping forward to stand beside Henrik. Let's see what they have to say. The walk through Helios Junction took 20 minutes, passing through chambers that showcased the diversity of species that had already joined the League. Daniela counted at least 30 different types of aliens, some humanoid, others so strange that her mind struggled to process their forms. They all stopped what they were doing to watch the human delegation pass, and in their eyes, Daniela saw something that made her heart ache. Not curiosity or welcome, but pity. They looked at humanity the way people looked at prisoners being led to sentencing. The conclave chamber was circular, with a raised platform at its center surrounded by tiered seating that climbed toward a domed ceiling covered in what appeared to be living constellations. Hundreds of aliens filled the seats, representatives from every member species of the League. At the highest tier sat 7 figures, larger and more elaborately dressed than the others. The conclave of voices, the ruling council that decided the fate of newcomers. Counselor Thresh led the human delegation to the center platform, then retreated to the lower tiers, leaving them exposed and vulnerable under the gaze of hundreds of alien eyes. One of the 7 council members rose, a towering creature covered in scales that shifted colors with each movement, cycling through blues and greens and purples. Species humanity, it said, its voice booming without need for translation. You have been observed for 3 of your centuries. Your world broadcasts signals into space with abandon, announcing your presence to any who would listen. You war among yourselves with terrible efficiency. You poison your own atmosphere and oceans. You create weapons capable of destroying your entire civilization. Yet you also make art of profound beauty. You explore with reckless courage. You love with intensity that transcends reason. You are a species of contradictions. Henrik started to respond, but the council member raised a scaled hand for silence. The Interstellar Commerce League was founded on principles of mutual benefit and collective security. We pool resources, share technology, defend each other against external threats. But membership requires contribution. Each species must provide something of value to the collective. Your petition will be judged on what you can offer us. Another council member rose, this one resembling a mass of tentacles surrounding a central eye that burned with inner light. Humanity possesses few natural resources we cannot obtain elsewhere. Your technology is primitive compared to our least advanced members. Your military strength is negligible. Your culture, while interesting, holds no unique insights. Tell us, Ambassador Henrik Loran, why should the League accept a species that brings nothing we need? The question hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Daniela saw Henrik's composure crack, saw him struggle for words that wouldn't come. They had prepared arguments about human creativity, about the value of diverse perspectives, about the potential for growth and contribution over time. But standing here in this chamber surrounded by civilizations that had mastered the stars while humanity still struggled to reach its nearest planets, those arguments felt hollow. Daniela stepped forward before Henrik could speak. She pulled the encrypted device from her pocket and held it up for the conclave to see. You ask what humanity brings to the League, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. We bring the same thing every species brings when they're threatened. We bring the will to survive. This device contains codes that would summon a warship from Earth. A ship designed to fight against superior forces. A ship built by people who have spent their entire history learning how to overcome impossible odds. You've shown us the dead worlds of species who refused your terms. You've stationed vessels near our home to ensure we understand the consequences of rejection. You've structured this entire encounter to make us feel weak and desperate. The chamber erupted in sounds that ranged from amused chirping to aggressive hissing. The council member with the central eye leaned forward, its attention focused entirely on Daniela. You threaten us? In our own station? With a single primitive warship? No, Daniela replied calmly. I'm showing you that humanity understands what you are. You're not a league of cooperating civilizations. You're a protection racket operating on a galactic scale. You identify developing species, show them evidence of your power, and force them to choose between submission or destruction. It's elegant and effective, and it's probably how you've maintained control for centuries. The council member with scales spoke again, its voice now edged with something that might have been respect or might have been anger. And what do you propose instead, Captain Daniela Reeves? A real partnership, she said. Not membership in your league, but an alliance between equals. Earth has resources you want, including a strategic location in an unexplored region of space. We have perspectives shaped by surviving in isolation, by solving problems without assistance. We have determination that comes from climbing to the top of our world's food chain without any advantages except our minds and our refusal to quit. You don't need obedient vassals. You need partners who can think independently and fight creatively when threats emerge. She held the device higher. This code stays untransmitted if you're willing to negotiate honestly. We'll discuss trade agreements, defensive pacts, and technology sharing on terms that respect both our sovereignty and your security concerns. But if you insist on the petition process, if you demand submission as the price of survival, then I'll transmit these codes and you'll discover that threatening humanity was a mistake. Our ship may be destroyed, but Earth will know what you are, and we'll spend every moment of our remaining existence preparing to resist you." The chamber fell silent. Daniela could feel Yuki's tension beside her, could sense Henrik's shock at her abandoning the diplomatic approach. But she also felt something else, a shift in the atmosphere of the room. The council members were conferring silently, their body language suggesting debate and calculation. Finally, the tentacled council member spoke. "You are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, Captain Reeves. Perhaps both. The conclave will deliberate on your proposal. You and your delegation will wait in guest quarters while we decide whether humanity's defiance deserves respect or punishment." As they were led from the chamber, Octavia leaned close to Daniela and whispered, "Did we just negotiate our way to peace or start a war?" "I don't know," Daniela admitted. "But at least we're still talking." Hours passed in the guest quarters, a suite of rooms that were comfortable but clearly monitored. The delegation sat together, too nervous to sleep, reviewing everything that had happened and trying to predict what would come next. Henrik paced constantly, sometimes muttering about diplomatic protocols and sometimes falling into worried silence. Yuki checked their exit routes and calculated how quickly they could reach Unity's dawn if evacuation became necessary. Octavia studied recordings of the conclave members, analyzing their reactions and looking for clues about which way the decision might fall. Daniela stood at the window, looking out at the stars and thinking about Earth. Somewhere out there, billions of people were going about their lives, unaware that their future was being decided in this moment. Children were being born. Couples were falling in love. Scientists were making discoveries. Artists were creating beauty. All of it could continue in freedom or could be crushed under the weight of galactic subjugation, and the choice might come down to whether she had read this situation correctly. The door opened suddenly. Counselor Thresh entered alone, its forearms held in a neutral position. "The conclave has reached a decision," it said. "You are to return to Earth immediately. No petition will be granted. No membership will be offered." Daniela felt her heart sink. They had failed. But Thresh continued, "However, the conclave has agreed to establish a provisional trade agreement with Earth. Limited exchange of resources and information, with terms to be negotiated by appointed representatives over the coming year. No defense pact. No technology sharing beyond basic communication protocols. Earth will remain independent but not isolated. The League will observe your development and re-evaluate full partnership in a decade, assuming you survive that long without our protection." It was less than they had hoped for but infinitely more than they had feared. Earth would remain free. Humanity would chart its own course among the stars, making its own mistakes and claiming its own victories. "Why?" Henrik asked. "Why agree to anything at all?" Thresh's expression, alien as it was, seemed almost amused. "Because Captain Reeves was correct. The League has become comfortable, accustomed to compliance and afraid of disruption. Perhaps we need partners who remember how to fight for what matters. Perhaps your species will teach us something we've forgotten. Or perhaps you will destroy yourselves within a generation and spare us the trouble of dealing with you. Time will tell." The journey home felt different than the journey out. Unity's dawn retraced its path through the remnant zones, but now Daniela saw those dead worlds not as warnings but as reminders. Civilization was fragile. Freedom was precious. Peace required courage more than compliance. When Earth finally appeared on their screens, blue and beautiful and alive, the entire crew stood on the bridge in silence, feeling the weight of what they had preserved. They had gone to the stars as representatives of humanity and returned as its defenders. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of species that would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But Earth would face those challenges as itself, flawed and determined and free. Daniela transmitted her final report to General Whitmore, including the activation codes she had never used. "Mission accomplished," she said simply. we're coming home. And somewhere in orbit around Earth, the Valkyrie powered down its weapons and settled into watchful waiting, a reminder that humanity knew how to build shields as well as bridges, and would never again negotiate from a place of helpless fear.